London, the heart of England and the United Kingdom. It is home to the King and the Queen of the royal family, whose ancestors have ruled over the kingdom and its colonies for centuries. London is home to many iconic monuments and places, such as Big Ben, Tower Bridge, and the Hyde Park.
But we don't care about any of that. London has a vast transit network with its own incredible history and facts, from the troves of double-decker buses to the world's first underground railway. So much transit, yet so little time. Welcome to Transit in a nutshell. Public transportation in London can be thought of beginning way back in 1510, when boats carried passengers across the River Thames. For centuries, crossing the Thames by a riverboat was the norm, especially since there was only one bridge until 1800. Public transport can also be considered started in 1829, when George Shillibeer introduced the horse-drawn omnibus. Strict regulations at the time, thanks to a monopoly of horse carriages, known then as a hackney, didn't allow Shillibeer to operate in central London. So his first route ran from Paddington to Bank via Islington. The route proved successful, helping to change the strict regulation in 1832, allowing anyone to operate omnibuses in the city. With a growing number of omnibus companies, in 1855, the London General Omnibus Company, or the General, was founded with the intent of buying up omnibus services to establish a unified system. The following year, it controlled 600 of about 800 omnibuses. Not long after, in 1861, the first horse-drawn tram was introduced by an American named George Francis Train, with the first route running between Notting Hill Gate and Marble Arch, followed by two other routes as well as other operators joining the business. As with anywhere in the world, trams were more liked by the public than omnibuses, but both played their own roles in the development of London's transportation network. However, by the mid-19th century, even before the horse-drawn tram was introduced, London was having congestion problems. The population was increasing, so the streets suffered from an abundance of pedestrians and horses. The UK was the creator of what we now know as the modern railway, with trains powered by steam pulling passenger and freight. Even though railways had made their way to London, passengers would only arrive at one of a few terminals on the periphery of the city. Being how developed London was, and Parliament not allowing any stations to be built within the city, there were no rail services running through the busy areas. Additionally, since these terminals weren't connected with each other, one couldn't simply travel from, say, Euston to London Bridge without having to be stuck in the congested streets. A solution to the congestion came from Charles Pearson in 1846. Rather than having trains running on the surface, he proposed having trains run underground. Initially, Parliament rejected the idea, but this wouldn't stop Pearson from continuing his pursuit of an underground railway. Although it took more than a decade of convincing, gathering funds, and what have you, on January 10th, 1863, the Metropolitan Railway began operating as the world's first underground railway. The route ran from Paddington to Farringdon, making stops with a few railway terminals along its journey. It was an instant success, carrying over 12 million passengers in its first year. Although he came up with this new railway, Pearson sadly passed away a few months before he can see his creation come to life. The Metropolitan Railway led the way in generating other underground routes, including those of the District Railway, while also expanding its own service. A notable underground route came in 1890 from the City and South London Railway. Prior to this railway, routes were built using the cut and cover technique, so routes were just under the surface. However, the City and South London built their route deeper, which was helped by a tunneling shield. If you ever wondered where the London Underground gets the nickname the Tube, it's because of the City and South London's tube-like tunnels. Additionally, the City and South London was the first underground railway in London to be electric when it began running. The railway traveled from Stockwell, heading north under the Thames, before terminating at King William Street. As the underground network was expanding, so had trams. While new routes were introduced, operators were also finding ways to replace horses as their mode of power. Steam and air power were tested, but weren't all that successful. A cable tram was brought to Highgate Hill in 1885 and proved to work. But it wasn't until 1901 when London United Tramways unveiled their first electric trams running in West London. This sparked, pun intended, other agencies and municipalities to pursue electric trams, where by 1915, the last horse-drawn tram was withdrawn, pun intended. Many expansions later, including connecting trams from North London to South London via the Kingsway tramway subway, the combined network accumulated close to 600 kilometers of track, carrying more than 3,000 trams. Meanwhile, the omnibus had also begun moving away from horses towards combustion engines, with the first bus introduced in 1902 by London General Omnibus Company. At the same time, the Underground Electric Railways Company of London, or the UERL, was formed by American businessman Charles Tyson Yerkes. The UERL had helped with the electrification of the district line, but also financed some underground railway projects. Around the same time, the UERL and other underground railway lines worked together to standardize their networks. The standardization collectively termed the railways as the Underground and led to the creation of a logo which would eventually be known as the roundel. In the 1910s, the UERL had owned a few tube lines as well as buying the London General Omnibus Company and some tram services. Oh no! The Germans are here and they want to bomb the city! Where can we find shelter? I know! Let's go hide in one of the many tube stations. Between 1914 and 1918, public transportation played a role during the First World War. Various tasks were carried out, including underground stations used as shelters during air raids, while buses were repurposed for various uses out in the battlefield. After the war, new bus companies popped up around London, causing havoc in the streets and financial struggles between the major bus and tram companies. Because of how annoyed everybody was, in 1933, the government took action in establishing the London Passenger Transport Board, which took charge of public transport in London. It was referred as London Transport. Right before London Transport was established, in 1931, London United Tramways introduced the first trolleybus route in London. Trolleybuses were set to replace trams, as the latter were supposedly a hazard for road users as well as becoming increasingly expensive to maintain. By 1940, when London United Tramways was integrated with London Transport, the 2600 tram fleet was cut in half. Bloody hell! What are those Germans up to again? Alright, back to the tube, everyone. During the Second World War, London Transport had an important role, just as the multiple transport companies had in the previous war. The tube was not only used as shelter during the Blitz, but also helped in other war matters, including protecting Prime Minister Sir Winston Churchill. In 1946, London Transport decided that trams were no longer going to be replaced by trolleybuses, but instead replaced with normal buses. On July 5th, 1952, the last tram ran from Woolwich to New Cross. For now. While it was unfortunate for trams to disappear, in 1956, the Routemaster bus was introduced to Londoners. Close to 2,900 of these buses were built and would prove to be reliable until retiring in the mid-2000s. These vehicles are not only an icon for London, but were voted as one of the top 10 design icons for Great British design. Because buses were cheaper to operate and maintain by the mid-20th century, and climate change wasn't invented yet, London Transport sought to replace trolleybuses with their combustion counterparts. So, on May 9, 1962, the last trolleybus operated from Wimbledon to Fulwell. Fulwell, more like farewell. In all this time, the Underground was evolving. In 1968, the Victoria Line began operating, which marked over 50 years since an Underground line was built from scratch. What makes the Victoria Line so unique is it is the first train service in the world to operate on its own. Well, it still needs a driver to dictate some aspects of operations, but trains generally drive on their own. While the tube had been expanding, a new rail service was introduced in 1987, dubbed the Docklands Light Railway, or DLR. Studies were conducted on how best to connect the redeveloping Docklands area with the rest of the city, and in the end, a form of light rail was chosen. The main differences of the DLR compared to the tube is that the trains have a smaller capacity but are also fully automated without the need of a driver, unlike the Victoria Line. But a train still needs someone operating the doors and operate the train in case something goes wrong. Speaking of light rail, trams made a comeback to London in 2000. The tram helped better connect some of the southern communities while also encouraging the population to use alternative forms of transportation. Up until 2000, London Transport was the authority for all things transport in London, and over the years, it has changed the way it's been managed. However, in the year 2000, Transport for London, or TfL, was established as the successor to previous authorities of London Transport. TfL gives control of transport to the Mayor of London with the help of a committee. From then, TfL has continued to change London's transport network while introducing new services, including the London Overground and the Elizabeth Line.
With history covered, let's look at some interesting facts. I know, what could be more interesting than history? London has an array of transport services covering land, water, and even the sky. While TfL is in charge of some of these services, others are owned entirely by separate entities, such as coaches and National Rail. so we'll just be focusing on TfL.
We'll begin with buses. There are 675 bus routes, which cover 50 bus stations and over 19,000 stops. With this much coverage, the majority of Londoners are no more than 400 meters from a stop. Buses have had their red color since the early 20th century. This started with the London Motor Omnibus Company when they chose red for their fleet. When they were bought by the London General Omnibus Company, the General adopted the red color for their buses as well, thus setting the red standard for London buses. Today, buses are operated by multiple groups under the guidance of London Bus Services Limited. Some operators include London United Busways Limited and London Sovereign Limited. Wait, the parent company of these two is the RATP Group, which mainly operates public transit in Paris. Huh? The DLR has essentially a single-digit number of routes, with 45 stations accumulating 38 kilometers across its network. As mentioned, the service operates almost autonomously, which allows anyone to sit at the front of a train and pretend they are the driver. Currently, the DLR is operated and maintained by the collaboration of Keolis and Amy. Wait. Keolis is a French company, much like the RATP Group. Why are the French so heavily invested in TfL? The overground consists of 6 routes, running 167 kilometers and serving 113 stations. The service functions much like conventional railways in the country, or national rail services to be exact. The intent of the overground was to spruce up neglected rail service in London while creating a network that goes around the city. Trains of the overground obtain power through a combination of a third rail and overhead catenary. Operations are currently carried out by Arriva Rail London, while Network Rail is responsible for maintaining most of the infrastructure. So the French haven't touched the overground yet. Similarly to the overground, the Elizabeth line functions much like other national rail services, covering 117 kilometers of route with 41 stations. The Elizabeth line plays a fundamental role of connecting East and West London with faster service through the heart of the city, while also connecting existing rail services at each end. The operation of the line is contracted to an outside entity. What doesn't function as a network rail service is a tram. London trams consist of 3 routes with 39 stops, with the service operated by First Group. Being a tram, it's the only rail service in London that not only operates on its own dedicated right-of-way, sharing the space with national rail carriers and utilizing abandoned rail corridors, but also runs in mixed traffic. You know, like a tram. Then there are the boats and a cable car operating in the River Thames. TfL's London River Services gives licenses to anyone wanting to operate out of one of 8 piers. But TfL also operates the Woolwich Ferry, which operates between Woolwich and North Woolwich. Meanwhile, the cable car connects Greenwich Peninsula to the Royal Docks and is contracted to a separate operator.
With all the interesting facts of TfL out of the way, let's move on to... I'm just kidding. We can't forget about the elephant in the room. Or should I say, the elephant and castle in the room? Right.
Last, and most definitely not least, the London Underground, commonly referred to as the Tube, is the centerpiece of London's transportation. It is really the only service in which TfL is directly responsible for operating. With 11 lines, there are more than 400 kilometers of track covered with 272 stations. There are elements which make the Tube unique. For example, trains use a 3rd and 4th rail, where most subways and metros use only a 3rd rail. Without getting too technical, the main reason for a 4th rail is insulation. If you want to understand more, you can watch Jago Hazzard's video on the subject. Another cool fact of the Underground is its inspiring map. In 1933, the Transport Authority, what was then London Transport, published a map from the work of Harry Beck to better depict the Tube. The design proved to be popular with the general public with how simple it made to navigate the Tube. Over the years, Beck's design would help with the creation of transit network maps all over the world.
Now, if you do plan on visiting London, you might be wondering, how does one use all this fine transit? How do I get a ticket? How do I get from Big Ben to Elizabeth Tower?
Actually, Big Ben is the bell inside of Elizabeth Tower.
Oh, really? Oh, well then how about, how do I get from Elizabeth Tower to the Tower of London?
Let's start with getting a ticket, or more like a means to pay for your journey. Because in London, you can get a paper ticket, but you're gonna end up unnecessarily paying more for your journeys. Instead, TfL and other operators in London have contactless payments. You can either pay with a contactless credit or debit card, use your smart devices, or obtain an Oyster card. Unless you don't have some contactless device, or you want a handy souvenir from TfL, you don't need an Oyster card as it costs £7 to obtain one. The fare system isn't necessarily complicated, and you only need to look into further options if you are living in the area or need some additional amenities such as if you have children. The general fare system is a pay-as-you-go system, meaning you take your contactless item, tap it on the yellow card reader at gates, platforms, or vehicles, and only tap again when you finish your journey, but only for some services. Whichever zone or zones you travel in is the fare you get charged. On top of that, there are daily and weekly fare caps, meaning when you reach a certain limit of payments, you don't pay any more for any additional journeys. Not every service uses the fare zones, such as buses and trams, which use a single fare.
When going around the city, one would certainly want to have a map at hand. Besides Google and Apple Maps, there's also Citymapper, Transit, and TfL Go, the last three having charms of their own. Citymapper does a good job of distinguishing stations and stops, as well as parked bikes, and Transit gives you a list of transport services as well as their departures. But at the very least, I recommend downloading TfL Go so you have the tube map on hand even when there's no access to the internet. So, you've come to the city, have used every single service, but you're hungry for more transport. Well, lucky for you, there are plenty of things to experience and discover outside of the normal transport options.
First and foremost is the London Transport Museum. Here you can learn a whole lot of information of transportation in London, including history, a collection of vehicles, and much more. Given the vast history of TfL and its predecessors, there are many secrets. If you'd like to embark on an adventure to find these hidden gems, I recommend watching the Secrets of the Underground series starring Geoff Marshall to help along your journey. Are you able to find everything on your visit? Maybe you can find something new of your own. Even though the Routemaster no longer operates for TfL, they still run in the city thanks to some charter services. One option is from Londoner buses who operate Heritage Route T15. A ticket must be purchased separately from TfL but is valid for an entire day. You can find more information in the link provided in the description.
Before we wrap up, here's some things to keep in mind when utilizing transport in London. First, remember to tap on and off with the same payment device when utilizing transport. Otherwise, you might get charged for more than what you owe. Tapping off is only required on the listed services, even if there are no barriers. However, you don't need to tap off for buses and trams.
Second, in regards to buses, you should wave down your bus to board and push the stop button on board when your stop is approaching. Also, when there is an area with many buses converging, they may all stop in different parts of the area. Luckily, each spot has a designated letter on their sign. You can use your map app to help find which letter you need for your bus and where to find it. Finally, not all services operate 24/7, including the tube. However, there are always late-night buses as well as some rail services operating on Friday and Saturday nights. So if you're out partying late in the night, just know that TfL has your back.
This has been London's transit in a nutshell. There's loads of information I couldn't fill in such a short amount of time. So if you'd love to learn more, check out Geoff Marshall, Jago Hazzard, and Network Nathan, among other fantastic creators, for more videos about London in the UK as well as overseas. You can also find information in the description for resources I've used to help create this video, as well as other information such as navigation and fares. This is London. The next station is